Sir, may I sit in that corner just until the snow stops? Get him away from me. Please, sir, I won't touch anything. Touch? You're stinking up my marble. You smell like something died in a dumpster. Give me that contract law. Did you steal it from a real student? That was my mother's. Then go get it. Fetch. Mr. Caldwell, that book is all he has. Do your job. Harlan, film this, everyone. Sir, page 30 of your draft, clause 14B. Read it before you sign. What did you say? Schedule C. Read who owns the holding company. It begs, it reads, and it lies. Throw it out with its trash. You'll lose everything in that contract. Everything. Later, that same CEO would search every shelter in the city for the boy he threw away. To understand what happened in that lobby, you have to go back to a public library on the east side of the city. Every morning, a tall young man in a gray coat took the corner table by the window. The librarians knew him. He never raised his voice, never slept at the table, never left a mess. He read contract law the way other young men read sports scores, hungry and fast and whispering the words to himself. His name was Aiden Harlow. The library was the only address he had left. Years earlier, his mother, Elena, had been a paralegal at a downtown firm, the sharpest one on her floor, the attorneys admitted, even if her name never made the letterhead. At night, she would sit with her son at the kitchen table and open the thick handbook she carried everywhere, its margins crowded with her looping blue ink. Contracts are stories, she told him. Every word is a witness. Find the word that lies, and you find the truth. Then she got sick, and the insurance company found a word that lied. An exclusion buried on page 60 of her policy. One definition nobody had read until it mattered. The claim was denied. The savings went first. Then the apartment. Then the funeral took whatever was left. Elena Harlow died in a county hospital bed, holding her son's hand, telling him to keep reading. So he kept reading. And every page he turned was a conversation with her. The shelters filled up each night. The trains were warm but unsafe. Winter in this city did not negotiate. That was where Harlan Reeves came in. Harlan had guarded the Caldwell Dynamics Tower for many years, long enough to remember when the marble was poured. One December night, he found Aiden folded behind the loading dock, blue-lipped and shaking, a book clutched to his chest like a life vest. Harlan looked at him for a long moment. Then he opened the side door. Corner behind the planter, he said. Heat vent runs all night, gone by morning. Promise me. Aiden promised. For some time, he kept that promise to the minute. Then came the night that changed everything. A young associate from the deal team stumbled out of the elevators, arms full of paper, exhausted and cursing. A misprinted draft went into the recycling bin by the elevator bank. Aiden was not going to touch it, but the cover page faced up at him through the dark, and his mother's voice came quiet and certain. Every word is a witness. He read all night under his coat with a dollar store flashlight. Most of it was standard, clean, almost elegant. Then he reached page 30, clause 14B. The definition of ancillary intellectual property ran 9 lines, twice as long as it needed to be, wide enough to swallow every patent Caldwell Dynamics owned. The clause pointed to Schedule C. Schedule C pointed to a transfer at closing. The receiving party was a company called Halcourt IP Holdings, registered in Delaware, owner unlisted. Aiden read it 4 times. The deal was not a merger. It was a harvest, dressed up as a handshake. He could have said nothing. Warning the man meant losing the warmest corner he had found in years, and Aiden knew it. But somewhere in a county hospital, a machine had once gone quiet because nobody read page 60. He slid the draft back into the bin, took out his pencil stub, and began to write. He spent the next day rehearsing one sentence in the library bathroom mirror. He only needed 30 seconds of a CEO's attention. You already know what he got instead. The laughter, the word fetch, his mother's handbook lying open in the snow like a shot bird. He picked the book up. He dried each page with his sleeve, slow and careful, while the lobby watched through the glass and laughed. Then Aiden Harlow turned his collar up and walked into the city and did not look back. The building was not done taking things from people that morning. By midday, someone had reviewed the camera footage and found the side door opening at midnight for some time. Harlan Reeves was called upstairs. Many years, the operations chief said, sliding a termination letter across the desk. And you traded them for a stray. Harlan signed it without a word. On his way out, he left his radio on the counter, and his dignity fully intact. But something else had happened in that lobby, something nobody noticed at the time. When the guards grabbed Aiden, a scrap of paper fell from his pocket and skidded under the reception desk. A cleaner found it that evening and almost threw it away. It reached Victor Caldwell's desk by accident, tucked inside a stack of messages. 5 handwritten lines. Clause 14B, Schedule C, Ancillary Definition too broad. Transfer at closing. Who owns the holding company? Caldwell read it twice and told himself it was nothing. He poured a drink. He answered emails. He read it again. The handwriting was small and ruler straight, the kind of writing that does not waste motion. At midnight, he called Sophia Langford, his general counsel, the only lawyer he trusted to tell him ugly truths. Probably nothing, he said. Look anyway. Langford called back in the early morning, and her voice had no sleep left in it. Victor, where did you get this? She had traced the chain word by word, the way the note told her to. The definition in 14B reached past the deal's core assets and gathered in every patent the company held. Schedule C moved them at closing automatically, no signature required, and Halcourt IP Holdings appeared nowhere else in the agreement. On paper, it was a stranger. If we sign, the patents walk out the door, Langford said. And Victor, this company is the patents. The buildings are just where we keep them. Caldwell stood at his office window with the phone against his ear and the city burning quietly below. Signing was soon. The board had already toasted the deal. Preston Hargrove had already drafted the press release. Who caught this? Langford asked. Which firm? I want to hire them. Caldwell looked down at the lobby at the corner behind the planter, and the night came back to him in pieces. The gray coat, the steady voice. Page 30, Clause 14B. Read it before you sign. The book in the snow, the word he had used, the one that now sat in his chest like a stone. Fetch. It wasn't a firm, he said quietly. He did not sleep. In the morning he was downstairs in a coat over his suit, asking a stunned morning guard which way the boy had gone. Nobody knew. Nobody had asked his name. The shelters had no record of an Aiden because he had never made it inside one before the beds ran out. There was only a description repeated like an apology. A tall kid, a gray coat, a book. Because the clip from the lobby had traveled phone to phone, group chat to group chat, until a junior analyst at Halcourt Capital froze on one sentence and forwarded it upward marked, Urgent. Page 30, Clause 14B. Read it before you sign. Caldwell had days to find a stranger in a city of millions. And across town, Preston Hargrove had just learned that someone had read page 30. Victor Caldwell had built a multi-billion-dollar company on the belief that anything could be located, priced, and acquired. By midday, that belief was gone. He had visited shelters. He had stood in lines of tired men holding a photograph printed from security footage, feeling eyes measure his coat and his shoes and his guilt. Nobody knew the boy, or nobody would tell him. He had Langford buy time with the lawyers, excuses dressed up as due diligence. Hargrove's office answered with smooth concern and a fruit basket. Caldwell read the card 3 times. Looking forward to the signing, Victor. It was the shelter director, a small woman with a tired voice, who finally said it. You're asking strangers. Ask whoever fed him to your heat vent. The kid trusted somebody. It sure wasn't you. Harlan Reeves lived in a narrow brick house with a flag on the porch and years of loyalty folded away in a drawer. When he opened the door and saw the CEO of Caldwell Dynamics standing in the cold, he did not look surprised. He looked patient, like a man watching a storm finally arrive. Mr. Caldwell, Harlan, I need to find him. Funny thing, Harlan said. Days ago you wanted him gone. Now you want him found. The boy's worth more than your deal, and you don't even know his name. Then give me his name. Harlan let the silence sit until it hurt. You don't deserve to find him, he said at last. But it's cold tonight, and he's out there, so I'll tell you where he reads. Not for you, for him. He pulled on his coat, and I'm coming with you. He sees your face alone. He'll be gone before you cross the room. What neither of them knew was that another search was already underway in a glass office across town. Preston Cole, chief counsel of Halcourt Capital, was studying the lobby clip frame by frame. Find the boy before Caldwell does, he told 2 associates. Offer him whatever it takes. A kid who sleeps outside will sign anything for a warm bed. I want that clause forgotten. The library on the east side smelled of old paper and radiator dust. Caldwell saw him from the doorway. The gray coat hung on the back of a chair, and the tall young man from the lobby sat at the corner table between two small children from the shelter around the block. He was teaching them to read, not from a picture book, from a rental agreement. This word here, Aiden was saying, means the landlord has to fix the heat. Circle it. When somebody tells you that you have no rights, you show them the circle. Caldwell stood there, a man who employed thousands of people, and discovered he was afraid to interrupt. It was Harlan who crossed the room first. Aiden rose, and the two of them held on to each other for a moment, and the boy said something quiet that made the old guard laugh and wipe his eyes. Then Aiden saw the man by the door. His face did not harden. It simply closed politely, like a business shutting for the night. "Mr. Harlow," Caldwell said. "Aiden, my counsel reviewed Clause 14b. You were right. You saw what many lawyers missed, and I threw you into the snow for it." He set his checkbook on the table. "Name a number. Any number. I owe you that." Aiden looked at the checkbook. Then he closed it gently and slid it back across the table, the way a teacher returns a wrong answer. "I can give you everything," Caldwell said. "You already took the only thing I asked for." Aiden said a warm corner. "I don't want your everything, Mr. Caldwell. I want respect, not rescue. There's a difference. My mother taught me to read it." The radiator ticked. The two children watched over the tops of their chairs, sensing, without understanding, that the man in the expensive coat was the one asking for shelter. "Now tell me what respect looks like," Caldwell said. Aiden took a folded page from the handbook and smoothed it flat. He had written 4 lines, small and ruler straight. He read them aloud evenly, the way his mother used to read terms into a deposition record. 1. You apologized to me in your lobby, in front of the same people who laughed. Same floor, same hour. You say my name when you do it. 2. Harlan Reeves gets his job back with back pay and a formal apology in writing. He is not a security cost. He is the only person in your building who understood what it's for. 3. I don't take gifts. You give me a real position on your legal research team with a salary and a performance review, like anyone else. The day I stop earning it, fire me. 4. You read my mother's handbook. Every page, every note in the margins. You want to know who saved your company, Mr. Caldwell. It wasn't me. He folded the page once and set it between them. Those are my terms. They're not negotiable. You, of all people, should appreciate clear drafting. For a long moment, the most powerful man in the city read 4 handwritten lines as carefully as he had ever read anything in his life. Then Victor Caldwell, who had not been told what to do since his father died, said, "Agreed. All 4. He extended his hand. Aiden did not take it right away. He looked at the hand, then at Harlan, who gave the smallest nod a man can give. Years had taught Aiden that promises were cheap and warmth was expensive. But his mother had taught him something else too. People read contracts. Contracts also read people. Then Aiden shook it once, firm and brief, a closing without champagne. The apology happened the next morning, at the same hour the snow had stopped days earlier. Word had gone around the building that the CEO had called everyone to the lobby, and the lobby filled with the same suits, the same receptionists, the same junior analysts who had filmed and laughed. Harlan Reeves stood by the planter in a crisp new uniform. Beside him stood Aiden Harlow, gray coat clean, his mother's handbook under his arm. Caldwell did not use the microphone they had set up. He wanted to have to raise his voice. "Days ago in this lobby, a young man asked me for a corner out of the cold," he said. "I called him trash. I threw his mother's book into the snow. Some of you laughed. I made it safe for you to laugh. That was the worst thing I've done in this building." Nobody laughed now. Phones were out again, but the hands holding them were uncertain. "His name is Aiden Harlow," Caldwell said. "Say it carefully because you'll be hearing it. While we walked past him every morning, he found the clause that would have gutted this company. Many lawyers missed it. A young man read it once in the dark for free. So I am sorry, Aiden, for the snow, for the word I used, for every door this building closed on you while you were busy saving it." He turned. "Mr. Reeves, many years. Welcome back." Then Caldwell did the thing nobody filmed properly, because nobody believed it was happening. He bent down, picked up Aiden's worn duffel bag from the floor, and carried it to the elevator himself, the way a doorman carries luggage for a guest of honor. "Your desk is on 19, he said. "Legal research starts soon." The clip was everywhere within hours. It crossed the city, jumped the industry channels, and landed on a screen in a glass office at Halcourt Capital, where Preston Hargrove watched it multiple times without blinking. The boy from the lobby now had a name, a badge, and access to every file in the deal room. Hargrove set down his espresso, and his voice came out pleasant and cold. "Preston, get me everything on Aiden Harlow. Where he sleeps, where he ate, where his mother died, everything." Because Hargrove understood something. Caldwell was still too relieved to see. The deal was not dead yet, and the kindest thing in that contract would be the trap. The 19th floor did not welcome him. Legal research at Caldwell Dynamics was associates from schools whose names opened doors by themselves. They had watched the lobby clip. They had also done the math. If a homeless young man could catch what they had missed, the clip was not just embarrassing for the lawyers. It was embarrassing for everyone with a framed degree. So the welcome Aiden got on his first morning was a stack of boxes on his desk and a smile with nothing inside it. "Vendor contracts," said the senior associate, a polished man named Grant Whitfield. "Renewals, mostly boilerplate, flag anything unusual." It was scut work, the kind they gave interns to break them. Whitfield expected to get the boxes back untouched, or worse, covered in confident nonsense he could quietly forward to the whole floor. Aiden took off his coat, sat down, and read. He did not look up for lunch. He read the way his mother had taught him, pencil moving, lips silent, every word called to testify. In the evening, he knocked on Whitfield's door and set down a single page with 11 lines on it, small and ruler straight. 11 problems. 9 were sloppy, the ordinary rust that builds up in old contracts. The 10th was a renewal that had been quietly auto-extending at an increase for years, which nobody had renegotiated. The 11th was the one that mattered. A logistics agreement with a penalty clause that activated if the company ever changed ownership, even partially, buried, dormant, and pointed straight at the merger everyone had just escaped. Whitfield read the page twice. Then he walked it down to Sophia Langford without saying a word to anyone, which for a man like Whitfield was a form of applause. Langford called Aiden into her office that night. She had a reputation in the building, a calm that made people confess. She slid the page back to him across the desk. "Who taught you to read like this?" "My mother, Elena Harlow. She was a paralegal." "Where did she practice?" "Kitchen table mostly," Aiden said. Langford smiled, and then she did something she had not done for any associate in years. She cleared the chair across from her desk, the one stacked with files, and told him that from now on it was his. "You'll still do your own work," she said, "but when I read something important, you read it after me. 2 sets of eyes, yours and whatever your mother left inside them." The days found a rhythm, and the building slowly found its manners. Receptionists who had laughed in the lobby now said good morning carefully, like people handling something they had dropped once. The 2 shelter kids came by on Thursdays after school because Aiden had asked for a library card as his only signing bonus, and the firm's law library was better than any branch in the city. Harlan patrolled the lobby with his new uniform and his old eyes, and when he passed the corner behind the planter, he sometimes touched the wall lightly, the way you touch a scar. Late one evening, Caldwell came down to the 19th floor with 2 paper bags of takeout because Langford had mentioned the new researcher never seemed to leave before the cleaners. They ate at Aiden's desk, the CEO on a borrowed chair, noodles steaming over a stack of indemnity riders. For some time they talked about nothing, the cold snap, the elevator music. Then Caldwell asked the question he had carried. "Why warn me after what I did? You owed me nothing." Aiden thought about it, chopsticks resting. "My mother died because nobody read page 60. He said, "You were about to die because nobody read page 30. She would say, "It doesn't matter whether we like the people we save. We read for them anyway." Caldwell looked at him for a long moment. "She would have hated me for a while," Aiden said. "Then she would have fixed you. She fixed everything." Caldwell kept the 4th condition last. The way a man saves the bill he is most afraid to open. He read Elena Harlow's handbook at night in his empty penthouse, with a glass of whiskey he kept forgetting to drink. The book itself was nothing, a standard practice guide out of date, but the margins were a second book entirely. Her blue ink ran along every page, arguing with the text, correcting it, joking with it. Next to a chapter on liquidated damages, she had written, "The penalty is never the number, it is the fear of the number." Next to a section on good faith, she had written, Good faith is what powerful people call the things they have not been caught doing. And then on page 212, between a clause about notice periods and a diagram of indemnity flows, Caldwell found a line that was not about law at all. Teach him that being unseen is not being unworthy. Caldwell closed the book. He sat for a long time in his lit window above the dark city, a man who had spent years being the most visible person in every room, and he wept for a woman he had never met, at a kitchen table he had never seen, who had raised the boy he threw into the snow. The next morning he did two things. He officially terminated negotiations with Halcourt Capital, citing material concerns with Clause 14B of the draft agreement. And he had the corner behind the planter cleaned, warmed, and fitted with a long oak bench with a small brass plate that nobody explained to visitors. The board exploded. The deal did not leave a room quietly. Directors demanded an emergency session. The pension funds wanted calls. A director named Howard Pierce, who had championed the deal, stood at the end of the long table and asked Caldwell in front of everyone whether it was true that the company's strategy was now being set by, and he read the phrase off his phone with surgical contempt. A stray the CEO felt guilty about. "No," Caldwell said. "Our strategy is being set by Clause 14B. The stray just happens to be the only one who read it. It bought him time, no more." Pierce wanted the deal revived. Half the board agreed with him. The stock had been priced with expectation inside it, and expectation, as Langford liked to say, is the only thing shareholders sue about faster than fraud. Hargrove, meanwhile, had not called. That was the part that kept Langford awake. Predators do not sulk, they circle. The first circle arrived wearing a beautiful coat. A woman introduced herself to Aiden in the lobby as a program director for the Meridian Opportunity Foundation. They had seen his story. They were moved. They wanted to offer him a full scholarship, housing included, at any law school that would take him. And with his story, she smiled. They would all take him. She set the paperwork on the bench beside him, beautifully printed. "Take your time," she said. "Dreams shouldn't be rushed." Aiden read it on the bench under the brass plate while she checked her phone. It took him minutes. The scholarship was real. The housing was real. So was Section 8, Paragraph 3, where the foundation reserved exclusive rights to his story, his likeness, and his cooperation in any media, legal proceeding, or public statement the foundation deemed beneficial. Cooperation, deemed beneficial. He followed the definitions to the back page the way his mother had taught him, and found the foundation's registered agent listed in Delaware at the same address he had memorized from Schedule C. He clicked her beautiful pin closed and handed the papers back. "Tell Mr. Hargrove the drafting was better this time," he said. "Section 8 still gives it away. If I sign this, I belong to Halcourt, and the first thing you'll deem beneficial is my silence about Clause 14B. Tell him I said no, and tell him I said it politely." The woman's smile stayed in place, but something behind it packed its bags. She left without another word, and Aiden sat alone on the warm bench for a moment, hands steady, heart hammering, understanding fully for the first time that the richest men in the city knew his name now, and not all of them wished him well. That night, Harlan's wife, May, insisted Aiden come for dinner, the first of what would become regular gatherings. The Reeves house smelled like roast chicken and lemon cleaner. May piled his plate like she was settling an old debt, and Harlan told stories from years of lobby duty, until Aiden laughed so hard he had to put his fork down. For a few hours, there were no clauses, no schedules, no Delaware. There was gravy, and a worn couch, and a baseball game, with the sound low. When Aiden left, May pressed leftovers into his hands and did not ask where he was staying, because Harlan had already quietly fixed up the room above their garage, and the question answered itself on the porch. He lay awake that night in a real bed, listening to a furnace instead of a heat vent, almost safe enough to believe it. Then came the answer to Langford's insomnia. It arrived by courier, addressed to the office of the General Counsel. Immaculate. Halcourt Capital was suing Caldwell Dynamics for breach of the exclusive negotiation agreement, abandonment of an executed letter of intent, and tortious interference. Total claim damages. Page 2 named the cause with care. The defendant terminated a binding negotiation on the advice of an unvetted individual with no legal credentials who had obtained confidential deal documents while trespassing on the premises. By morning, the story was on every business channel. And it was not the story of a clause, It was the story Hargrove's people had spent time feeding into the wires, photogenic and poisonous. Billionaire torches a massive deal on the word of a homeless young man he met in his lobby. One anchor held up the lobby clip. Another held up a quote from an unnamed Halcourt source, calling Aiden with lawyered precision the sidewalk consultant. On the 19th floor, the boxes of vendor contracts sat finished and neat on the corner of his desk, while Aiden read the complaint front to back twice, the city loud below the windows. They were not coming for the company anymore. They were coming for him. And on page 31 of their own lawsuit, Preston Hargrove had made the first mistake of his career. The stock fell sharply. Numbers like that have a sound inside a company. Phones ringing differently. Doors closing more softly. Thousands of people doing their jobs while reading headlines about whether they would keep them. The story had everything television loves. A billionaire, a homeless young man, a massive deal set on fire allegedly by a guilty conscience. Halcourt's media team fed the wires a new course every morning. The phrase sidewalk consultant had its own graphic on networks. A panel of smiling experts debated whether Victor Caldwell had suffered a breakdown of judgment triggered by a viral shaming. Then they came for Aiden directly. A photographer camped outside the Reeves house and got his picture taking out May's trash, which ran under the headline, "From Garbage to Glory." Someone leaked his mother's name, and a tabloid called her death, a tragic spiral, as if poverty were weather. A business blog published his shelter intake records, which were supposed to be sealed and were not even accurate. Reporters called the firm's law library asking if it was true the boy had a criminal record. He did not. Preston Cole's legal strategy was built on the same single hinge. On page 2 of the complaint and in every interview his proxies gave, the same word kept surfacing: trespassing. The boy was trespassing when he read the draft. The documents were confidential. Therefore, the warning was stolen property. The termination was contaminated, and the claim stood on clean marble. It was elegant. It made the building's victim into its burglar. Hargrove himself went on television exactly once, which was all he needed. He sat in a studio armchair in a soft gray suit, sounding wounded and reasonable. "I admire the young man truly," he said. "It's a wonderful story, but business runs on signed agreements, not on feelings." Victor broke his word. "If a court decides my counterparty can walk away from a binding commitment because a trespasser with no training frightened him, then no deal in this country is safe." He smiled with a regret he had practiced in a mirror. "I take no pleasure in this. It is simply what a broken promise costs at our level." The clip ran. It was, the anchors agreed, very persuasive. Langford assembled her war room on the 19th floor, and for the first time in his life, Aiden Harlow sat at a conference table, as the subject of a lawsuit instead of a footnote to one. She slid the complaint across to him the way he had once slid a checkbook back. "They'll subpoena you. They want you in that arbitration room under oath, scared. Cole will try to make you the thief in this story. So, we prepare, starting with the worst question. Did you take that draft out of the building?" "No, I read it and put it back in the bin." "Did you copy it?" "I didn't have to," Aiden said quietly. "I remember it." Langford exchanged a look with Whitfield, who had begun, without anyone ordering it, to sit on Aiden's side of the table. For days, they drilled him. Whitfield played Cole, pacing, sneering, firing the questions they knew were coming. "Where do you sleep, Mr. Harlow? What did you eat that week? Remind us what you were wearing in that lobby." The point of such questions is not information. The point is to make a witness feel small in front of strangers because small people stumble. Aiden answered everything flat and slow many times. On the third evening, Whitfield dropped the act, looked at him, and said, "He's going to underestimate you. God, I hope he does." Then Whitfield said something nobody expected. "There's a pattern here. Halcourt bought a censor company in Ohio years ago. Founder sued afterward, claimed his patents had been moved to a holding entity before the ink dried. Case settled, sealed, gone. And a materials firm out of Pittsburgh before that. Same shape, acquired, stripped, shelled. Langford was already writing. 2 prior targets, same playbook. If we can tie Halcourt IP holdings to Hargrove personally, the exclusivity agreement collapses. Fraud unwinds everything it touches. "Can we tie it?" Caldwell asked from the doorway. "No," Langford said. "Delaware doesn't have to tell us who owns it. The 2 settlements are sealed. Hargrove's name appears on nothing. That's the whole point of him." The settlement offer arrived the next morning, and it was a masterpiece of cruelty. Halcourt would drop the entire claim. No payment. The deal could even be revived on improved terms. Clause 14b removed everything transparent. Hargrove would absorb his legal costs and call it a misunderstanding between friends. There was one condition printed in the middle of the page where it could not be missed. Caldwell Dynamics would issue a public statement confirming that its termination had relied on a false analysis by an unauthorized individual who had unlawfully accessed confidential materials. The individual would be named the boy. Keep the company. Pierce read it aloud to the board with something close to relief. It's a gift, Victor. The stock recovers. We say one sentence about one kid, and this nightmare is over. He'll land fine. People love him. The sentence is a lie. Caldwell said, "It's the claim and the company your father built against a press release." Caldwell looked around the table at faces he had promoted, enriched, and in cases personally saved, and counted the votes he no longer had. "I threw him into the snow once," he said. "I won't do it again on letterhead. If this board wants that statement, you'll need a different signature." He stood. "And you should all know the analysis wasn't false. We have lawyers who confirmed it. The kid's only crime was being right in a building where nobody else was. The board gave him until the arbitration ruling. If the claim stood, his resignation would be on the table with it. Something else happened that week. Small and unreported. Engineers Aiden had never met began stopping by the 19th floor with coffee he had not asked for. A note appeared on his desk in unfamiliar handwriting. "My team's patents were in Schedule C. Thank you." Thousands of people had done their own math, and it was not Pierce's math. That night, Aiden could not read. The words would not hold still, and the room above the garage felt suddenly borrowed like everything else. He found Harlan in the kitchen, and the old man took one look at his face, got his coat, and said, "Walk with me." They went to the shelter, the one with the beds that always ran out. The night manager waved Harlan through like family. In the common room, a dozen kids were doing homework under lights that buzzed, and a small girl named Tessa, one of his Thursday students, lit up and demanded Aiden inspect her vocabulary list immediately. He sat with her. He checked every word. And somewhere between the spelling of necessary and the spelling of receive, his hands stopped shaking. "They're saying you stole something," Tessa said, not looking up on the TV. "Did you?" "No. I read something somebody threw away." "Then why are they being like that?" "Because reading it cost them the deal." Tessa considered this with the gravity of a child. "You should read more stuff," she concluded, and went back to her list. And Aiden laughed for the first time in days. On the steps outside, Harlan lit the one cigarette May allowed him per crisis. "I did years between the army and that lobby," he said. "Want to know the whole secret of all of it? Stay when it's hard. That's it. That's the whole secret. Anyone can stand a post on a sunny day. What if I lose them the company because I couldn't keep quiet in a lobby?" Harlan took a moment with that smoke drifting through the cold. "Son, you didn't write that clause. You just refused to let it bite a man who'd been cruel to you. There are people in office towers who never once in their lives did anything that clean." He flicked the cigarette out. "You'll stay. You stayed when nights were cold. A conference room can't hurt you the way this city already tried to." The hearing was set. The arbitrator, retired Judge Margaret Hartley, was known for two things. She read every exhibit, and she despised theater. Cole filed his witness list. The last name on it was Aiden Harlow. The night before, Aiden sat at the small desk above the garage with the complaint, the exhibits, and his mother's handbook, reading the way she had taught him. "Every word is a witness," he kept hearing. He fell asleep at the desk. He woke with a sentence burning in his head, and it was not from the complaint. "Take your time. Dreams shouldn't be rushed." The cream-colored paperwork on the bench, the Meridian Opportunity Foundation. He closed his eyes and walked through them again, page by page, the way he could walk through anything he had ever read. Signature block, back page, bottom left. Authorized officer of the foundation. A name in tidy serif type above a Delaware address. Tobias Marsh. He opened the complaint with both hands, suddenly very awake. Exhibit 4. The exclusive negotiation agreement itself, executed with Halcourt Capital's corporate authorization stapled behind it. The lawsuit's own paperwork sworn, certified, and filed by Preston Cole. Signature of authorizing officer, Tobias Marsh. The same hand, the same name. One man signing for the foundation that tried to buy his silence, and for the fund that was suing them. And if his memory of one more document was right, for a third entity as well, the one nobody could open. the one waiting at the end of Schedule C in Delaware. Aidan sat very still in the lamplight, his heart going like a hammer, understanding what he was holding. Hargrove had hidden himself perfectly behind walls of paper. But paper has to be signed by somebody, and the somebody had been busy. He called Langford, and she answered on the second ring, because general counsels in crisis do not sleep either. "Sophia," he said, "I know who owns the holding company." And Cole filed the proof himself. The arbitration room held more power than one. No jury, no gallery, one long table, two armies of lawyers, and at the head of it, retired Judge Margaret Hartley, who set a worn fountain pen beside a stack of exhibits she had visibly read. Outside, reporters waited by the elevators. Inside, Preston Hargrove sat flanked by Preston Cole, wearing the soft gray suit from television and the patience of a man who had already counted his money. Cole's morning was flawless. The exclusivity agreement executed and binding, the letter of intent signed by Caldwell himself, the termination abrupt unilateral, and the cause, he said, pausing so the word could find every chair, a trespasser, a young man with no degree, no training, and no authorization, read documents he had no right to see. My client lost a deal to gossip from a recycling bin. Then after lunch, he called the gossip to the stand. Aidan Harlow walked to the witness chair, in a plain navy tie May Reeves had pressed that morning, carrying nothing. He had asked Langford if he could bring the handbook. She had said no, you won't need it, and she was right. But his hand kept finding the empty place where it usually sat. Harlan and May sat on hotel chairs in the hallway outside, because arbitration is private, and Harlan said the boy should not have to ride home alone, win or lose. Cole started gently, which everyone in the room understood to be a blade. "Mr. Harlow, where were you living on that night?" "Behind the planter in the Caldwell Dynamics lobby, and before that shelters, when there were beds, the library until it closed. Trains. You have no law degree?" "No, sir. No paralegal certificate. No college. No formal training of any kind." "No, sir. And yet a multi-billion-dollar company canceled a massive merger on your word. Tell me, did you take the draft agreement with you when you were removed?" "No, sir. I put it back in the bin. So, we have only your memory." Cole smiled at Hartley. A homeless young man's memory of a document he saw once in the dark. That is the foundation of their entire defense. "Yes, sir," Aidan said. "Would you like to test it?" The room went still. Cole's smile thinned. "Excuse me. Clause 14b. You have it in front of you. Exhibit 2, page 30. Aidan folded his hands. "Ancillary intellectual property means any patent, patent application, invention, improvement, trade secret, technical data or know-how, whether or not reduced to practice, owned, licensed, controlled, or used by the company or any affiliate, whether or not material to the business as presently conducted." He recited for 2 full minutes, comma by comma, the definition, the carve-outs, the cross-reference to Schedule C, while Halcourt associates followed along with their fingers on the page, like children learning to read. When he finished, nobody spoke. Judge Hartley looked down at her exhibit, then up with new arithmetic in her eyes. "The witness appears to remember the document," she said dryly. "Move along, counsel." Cole moved along, but the floor had tilted, and on redirect, Sophia Langford tilted it the rest of the way. "Mr. Harlow, in your own words, what does that clause do?" "It harvests. The definition reaches every patent the company owns. Schedule C assigns all of it at closing to an entity called Halcourt Holdings automatically. No further signature. Caldwell Dynamics would have sold itself and woken up owning its office furniture." "Objection. The clause speaks for itself." "It does," Hartley said, overruled. "It speaks exactly the way he says it does." Langford lifted a thin folder. Exhibit 4. Claimants own filing the exclusivity agreement they are suing on with Halcourt's corporate authorization, at page 31, signed by an authorizing officer. "Mr. Harlow, would you read the name Tobias Marsh and this, a certified copy of the state charity registration for the Meridian Opportunity Foundation, which offered Mr. Harlow a scholarship in exchange for exclusive rights to his story and his cooperation in any legal proceeding. Treasurer and authorized officer Tobias Marsh, and finally the formation filing for Halcourt IP Holdings Delaware obtained. The incorporator's signature, Mr. Harlow. Tobias Marsh, Langford set the folder down. One hand, Your Honor. One hand signing for the fund that is suing, for the shell that receives the patents, and for the charity that tried to purchase this witness's silence. We ask the tribunal to direct the claimant to disclose the beneficial owner of Halcourt Holdings. Cole was on his feet. Irrelevant, confidential, and outrageous. Hartley took off her glasses. Mr. Cole, your client's claim rests on the premise that the termination was unjustified. If the counterparty to this merger secretly owned the vehicle receiving the assets, that premise has a hole in it the size of Delaware. Your client will answer, or I will draw every inference the law allows me to draw. She turned. Mr. Hargrove, who owns Halcourt IP Holdings? For the first time in the proceeding, Preston Hargrove looked at Aiden Harlow, not at the tie or the cheap shoes, at the eyes that had read page 30 in the dark. Whatever he was searching for there, mercy, or fear, or a price, he did not find it. On advice of counsel, Hargrove said quietly, I declined to answer. The sentence landed like a verdict because it was one. Hartley let the silence do its work, then nodded at Langford. Anything further for this witness? One question. Mr. Harlow, why did you do it? You owed Victor Caldwell nothing. Tell the tribunal why you read and why you warned him. Aiden was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, he did not perform. He simply set it down like the folded page of conditions in lines that were small and ruler straight. Mr. Cole asked, what qualifies me to read a contract? Here's my answer. My mother was a paralegal named Elena Harlow. She got sick. Her policy had an exclusion on page 60. One definition, 14 words long. Nobody read it until she needed them to. And those 14 words decided she wasn't worth saving. She died in a county bed, teaching me the only inheritance she had. Read every word because every word is a witness. You ask why a homeless kid read a contract in the dark? Because I know what an unread page costs. It costs savings, then apartments, then funerals. People in this room bill high hourly rates and call reading a privilege. It isn't. It's protection. I didn't warn Mr. Caldwell because he was kind to me. He wasn't. I warned him because thousands of people work in that building, and somewhere in it is a janitor with a sick wife, trusting that somebody upstairs read the rest of her benefits booklet. My mother wrote a line in a margin once. Being unseen is not being unworthy. I'm not the exception to this city, Your Honor. I'm just the proof of what it keeps throwing away. Nobody in that room ever agreed afterward on how long the silence lasted. Judge Hartley looked at her notes for a moment, and those nearest to her said later that she pressed her thumb briefly against her eyes. Victor Caldwell sat in the second row through all of it, a party with no lines. He had buried a father, rung opening bells, shaken hands worth billions. Asked years later to name the proudest moment of his career, he never mentioned any of that. He said it was sitting still in a hotel conference room, listening to a young man explain what reading is for, and knowing every camera in the country was finally waiting for the right person. The ruling came. The claim was denied in full. The exclusivity agreement was unenforceable, procured through fraudulent concealment of the claimant's interest in the receiving entity. And on the final page, a paragraph nobody had dared hope for. The tribunal's findings, together with exhibits, would be referred to federal regulators and to the Bar Association regarding the conduct of counsel. Hargrove left through the lobby because there was no other way out. Cameras watched him wait for an elevator that took witnesses said years to arrive. Soon, the Ohio founder had petitioned to unseal his settlement. So had Pittsburgh. Preston Cole's firm issued a statement, noticeable mainly for the words it avoided, and Tobias Marsh, the busiest signature in Delaware, stopped answering his phone. On the courthouse steps, a reporter shouted the only question that mattered. Caldwell stopped, looked into the cameras, and gave the answer that would be replayed for years. The boy I threw out saved every job in my building. Print whatever you want about me. Spell his name right. The war was over. What nobody expected was what Aiden Harlow chose to do with the piece. Empires of paper burned quickly once somebody lights the right page. Within months, the unsealed settlements had given the regulators a map, and Tobias Marsh, facing the consequences of being the busiest signature in Delaware, decided he would rather be the most cooperative. Halcourt was unwound fund by fund to pay back the founders it had stripped. Preston Cole answered questions before the Bar Association, with none of his conference room poise. And Preston Hargrove, who had built a career on never appearing in any document, finally got his name on thousands of them, all filed by prosecutors. Nobody at Caldwell Dynamics celebrated. That was, everyone agreed, the strangest part. The stock recovered. Howard Pierce discovered a sudden passion for spending more time with his family, and the company simply went back to work. Thousands of jobs intact. Patents exactly where they belonged, in a building that now treated its lobby a little differently because the corner behind the planter had become something nobody planned. The oak bench stayed. The small brass plate stayed too, and visitors finally learned what it said because a business magazine photographed it for a cover story. Everyone deserves a warm corner. Security guards kept a quiet new custom there. When someone came in from the cold, they got minutes and a coffee before anyone asked them anything. Harlan trained every new hire himself, and his first lesson had nothing to do with cameras. "You're not guarding the building from the city," he told them. "You're guarding what this building learned." On a bright Saturday, the lobby filled again, the way it had for an apology. This time, there was a ribbon. The Elena Harlow Legal Literacy Fund opened with storefront clinics and one promise. Anyone could walk in with anything they had been told to sign, and someone would read it with them. Every word, free. Lease agreements, insurance policies, benefits booklets, the fine print that decides quietly which families stay above water. Caldwell endowed it personally and asked for nothing on the wall but her name written the way she wrote it in looping blue. The clinics paid for themselves within a year in the only currency that mattered. Families served, clauses caught, lives quietly unbroken, not counted because they never had to know. The first clinic classroom was not a storefront at all. It was a room at the shelter, fresh paint and warm light, and shelves Harlan built by hand with a sign over the door that May had to read to her husband twice before he believed it. The Harlan Reeves Reading Room. The old guard stood under it for a photograph, ears red, while kids cheered for him, and he said gruffly that it was a ridiculous amount of fuss, and then he asked May quietly to take one more picture. Aiden Harlow stood at the back of that room and watched, and the feeling in his chest had no clause that defined it. His life had become a strange and busy thing. The scholarship offers had come on their own after the hearing, real ones this time, with no hidden sections inside them. He had read every word anyway, out of love for the habit, and chosen the state university across the river. Days at the firm, nights in class, Sundays at May's table, where his chair was simply his chair now, and the room above the garage had a bookshelf too heavy to ever move out. At the firm, his title was still legal researcher. His performance review happened exactly on schedule, because he had insisted, and Sophia Langford wrote one line in the box reserved for overall assessment. He reads like it matters because he knows it does. Whitfield gave him the office gossip and half his caseload. The associates who had once handed him boxes to break him now lined up to have him break their drafts instead, and the ones who learned to enjoy it became somewhere along the way his friends. His desk sat by the north window on the 19th floor. If he stood, he could see straight down into the lobby, to the bench, to the exact square of marble where a CEO had once told him to fetch. Caldwell returned the handbook on an ordinary day, with no speech. He had kept it for months, longer than any document of his life, and when Aiden opened it that night, he understood why. The margins had grown next to Elena's notes in careful black ink that did not quite hide its nerves. A second conversation had begun. Page after page, questions, answers, arguments, and beside the line on page 212, beside being unseen is not being unworthy. Caldwell had written 4 words and signed nothing, because nothing needed signing, he learned. So did I. Aiden sat with the book open for a long time. His mother had spent her whole life reading other people's words for them. Now her words were being read. The handbook had been a survival tool, then evidence, then a bridge. It was finally just what she always meant it to be, an inheritance. Caldwell changed in ways the magazines never found interesting enough to print. He still ran a hard company, but on the first Thursday of every month, a man in a plain sweater sat at the back of the shelter reading room, taking notes like a student. And once a season, he taught the class himself. What CEOs Miss in a Contract by Victor Caldwell. Attendance was always full. Tessa graded him strictly. The following winter, the snow came back to the city. Aiden taught his class at the reading room that night. Kids and adults, working through a used car loan that one of the mothers had brought in. Tessa, ferociously literate, had appointed herself his teaching assistant, and took attendance like a federal marshal. Afterward, while chairs scraped and parents zipped coats, she helped him stack the workbooks, and she asked the question all of it had been waiting for. What if you read everything and find the bad part and nobody listens? Like, what if you tell them and they just laugh at you? Aiden looked at her, and for a moment he was back in a marble lobby holding seconds of a rich man's attention in his bare hands, watching it drop into the snow. Then you read it louder, he said. You stand there and you stay and you read it again. Somebody in that room is listening. I promise you it's almost never the person you're talking to, but somebody always hears it. Tessa weighed that, nodded once and filed it away the way she filed everything permanently. He walked home through the falling snow past the tower. Through the glass, the lobby glowed gold. There was someone on the bench, a stranger in a wet coat, hands around a paper cup of coffee, and a guard standing near, not asking him anything. Aiden stopped on the sidewalk where he had once dried each page of his mother's handbook with his sleeve, and he watched the warm corner do its quiet work. And then he turned his collar up and walked on home, where a porch light was always left on now because May said the question of where he was staying had been answered for good. The bench was never about furniture in the end. It was about what buildings and people decide to do the second time. Caldwell got a second chance to see who was in front of him. Harlan got his years back with interest, and a paralegal from a kitchen table who never saw her name on a letterhead got it on a wall instead, where every person who walks in unseen can read it. Every word is a witness. That was her whole case, and she won it. Here's a question for you to take with you. If you had seconds to make someone powerful actually listen, what would you say? Put it in the comments. Somebody scrolling tonight might need your exact words. If this story moved you, share it with one person who feels unseen right now. And subscribe, because there are more stories like this one waiting to be read out loud. Every word, because every word is a witness. Real talk. I told this story because I've been the person nobody saw. Maybe you have too. The world will call you trash right up until the moment it needs what's in your head. Keep reading anyway. Keep showing up anyway. And when you make it, save somebody a warm corner.